Oh, my bad. My bad. I thought it would go down to the side. Welcome into the Irish NFL show presented by Cassidy Travel, Ireland's number one travel agents on this cold, cold Monday night in Ireland. Michael McQuaid, Colum, and Brian O'Leary. Lads, welcome in and welcome into everyone, folks. Please, if you want to get involved this evening, we'll read out some comments at the end. Check out YouTube, Irish NFL show, and we'll get into it. Colum, first off, what was the currency of Ireland pre-Euro?
Yeah, I think you're referring to the punt fest that we
Jesus.
saw at Mile High last night, Michael. Yeah, it was quite the Sunday night football fest. Delighted to come out on the right side of it, though. It was struggle enough today to make it through. Empathy to any fellow Bronco fans who were watching, but also obviously any Niners fans who sat up and watched that live.
And Brian, just when you thought it was going to get better, we have to watch Cooper Rush and Daniel Jones in prime time tonight.
Yeah, it's cold here, but it's going to be red hot in MetLife tonight. Big game tonight in the division. Should be exciting, Michael. I'm going to go through the torture which you went through last night of staying up till all hours. I'll be doing it tonight. I took a punt. I took the right punt. I went to bed before Sunday Night Football and I watched the game this morning at a sensible hour without knowing the score. Yeah, it was an absolute punt fest and two offences that really did struggle to move the ball for large parts of the game.
I am yet to miss a game in prime time this season, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I will miss Thursday night because I'm not watching the Bengals against the Dolphins. Sorry, folks. Let's get into it. We'll talk about some games last night, and then we will get into giving our picks for the Giants against the Cowboys. I keep forgetting what game is tonight, but I'm sure it'll. Well, please God, it's a good game for a neutral. The first game we're going to talk about is the Bills against the Dolphins. Now, Colin, from my memory, from creating graphics last week, you were the only person to pick the Dolphins. But I think, taking picks aside, it was a really interesting game because the Bills, for all that they are and for all the hype that we've, and including a lot of us have talked about, they can't run the ball at all properly. The offensive line yesterday was interesting to watch, and they couldn't get any more than 19 points with the offense in two games where they've had over 70 points scoring. The Dolphins defense come up big, but a hell of a result for the Dolphins, and they're miles ahead of the Jets and the Patriots, those two teams. Yeah.
I mean, look, the for me, a number of things stand out in relation to this. Firstly, Mike McDaniel's doing a heck of a job there in Miami. He does not look like a rookie head coach, and he has his team prepared, and they go out and they play tough. And in terms of the speed and the concepts that he has created, they are fantastic to watch. To me, look, the Bills will be fine. They were missing, remember, basically their entire starting secondary last night. Obviously, Mike Hyde is out for the season, but they will get other players back. They were missing a number of players, and by the end, in terms of the way in which that stadium is set up, so only the road teams. Sideline is in the sunshine, which is a distinct advantage in September. But this was the game. The Bills put it all on Josh Allen. I think I saw he had 63 passing attempts, and then the rushing attempts. It was going to catch up with them. Yeah, you're Michael. They do have to get better, certainly at running the ball. That is a piece, but they were somewhat depleted, and they ran into one of the best teams in the AFC. Certainly, currently the Dolphins are very, very hot, and that pass to me, the Tua pass to Waddle, was the standout, and Tua showing again what he can do with a clutch performance in the fourth quarter. I think both of these teams certainly could meet later in the season. Obviously, in the regular season, they will. But I think looking at it right now, you would have to say both of these teams look like they will be playing meaningful football in January.
Brian, I've seen some Bills fans give out today that it was too hot in Miami when I'm nicking a quote from a different broadcaster, but they were all partying for 2 days. Friday and Saturday there wasn't an issue, and then suddenly last night there was an issue. Should Tua have been in the field in the third quarter? I think that's definitely a talking point to have, because the man looked like he was cowed. He was brown bread, as we say, at one point in the second quarter, and I just don't understand how he was allowed back into that game. And I know there's going to be an investigation and stuff, but for the whole, I'll not start naming names, but there was a brigade on social media last night at about 8 p.m. Ireland that were starting to give out, going, "Oh no, it was a back injury." It was like, I've watched the play 20 times now. It wasn't his back. No way was it his back. I just was stunned at how he just came back out again.
I agree with you, Michael. It did look like he was coming back. So you see players go off with concussions and they go into the blue tent, and then it's obviously declared they're not coming back into the game. But when they go off, they look perfect. They look perfectly fine within reason. Tua didn't look fine. I mean, the guy couldn't stand. He looked like one or two of us on a good night out, being carried off the field. And it did look like in a million years he'd be back in the game. And then he comes back on and he shows that 45-yard bomb to Waddle on a 3rd and 22. So maybe he was concussed, because he doesn't seem to show many of those type of balls, throughout the course of his career so far. But look, that's for another day. I don't really want to take away from a great Dolphins performance. Colum touched on, the home field advantage, and you're talking about the Bills fans being there since Friday and look like they're having a great weekend. Dolphins have won 8 home games in a row now. 10 of the last 11 home games they've won. It's clearly a factor going down to play in the heat, in particular around September, October. It just teams can't handle it. I felt the Bills did handle it. If you look at Allen's numbers yesterday in particular, 15 and 17, 150 yards for 2 touchdowns early on in the game. He was literally lights out for large parts of the first game. He ran for over 40 yards. He ends up at 400 yards, but yet they only scored 19 points. I did feel he was struggling slightly towards the back end of the game. I didn't put it down to the heat. I actually put it down to the fact that he had a difficult day. Offensive line he touched on was struggling. And on the last drive in particular, when they got to the 2-yard line, like we saw Dorsey's reaction at the end, but I think he needs to put his hands up today and, think better of himself, or ask questions, or the head coach should be asking questions, because the play calling when they got to the 2-yard line I thought was poor. They went back to throwing it into the end zone when there was run pass options there. We've seen Josh Allen run them in. Okay, Singletary isn't the greatest back in the league, but from 2 yards out you would expect them to get in. They couldn't get it over the line. And it's one player I want to call out, because we see all these big contracts getting handed out to players from free agency. Sometimes the player that you get for 4 or 5 million on a 1-year contract that has to prove it is a better player than these guys that are getting the 3 or 4 year contracts. Melvin Ingram yesterday for the Dolphins, who's been passed around the league quite a few times now, had a really good game. I mean, he recovered a fumble, he sacked Josh Allen, there was a strip fumble, Bills recovered, but there was a 7-yard loss, a significant 7-yard loss when they were in field goal range and they ended up having to punt. He had a monster of a game yesterday, and we touched on in the leading up to the season, how the defense was still strong, and if they kept going in the right direction as they were towards the back end of last season, that would be significant, and it would just take this offense to click into gear. Everything is going in the right direction. I agree with Colum, the head coach. You see players buying into what he's doing. We talk about other coaches in the league and players buying into what they're doing in that organisation. It's clear that these players are certainly playing for them. And Tyreek Hill itself, I don't know if you saw his press conference after the game where he said he didn't even know who they were playing on Thursday night. He had a bit of a join, and he said he's looking forward to seeing Eli Apple. I imagine Eli Apple will be having nightmares all week in the lead up to that game. But they're on a crest of a wave, and it's a big game now on Thursday.
It's going to be a really enjoyable game on Thursday. Just before we look on to the next game, Colin, I know you have both touched on Mike McDaniel there. The Bills did have significant issues, and having a couple of safeties out does not help, especially for long term. But it's been really impressive to watch the Dolphins, especially in the last 2 weeks, in terms of Tua and his play and how it has improved year on year. And with McDaniel at the helm there, God only knows what they're going to be like come Halloween time.
Well, as we're seeing though, Michael, across the league, injuries can very quickly catch up with you. But yeah, look, Mike McDaniel, when you hear some of his former players talk about him and the way in which he loves football and the way in which he goes out of his way to help players to fulfill their potential, to make the best of themselves. Everything he does is about that, and players, I think, respond to to him and to that sort of coaching, and we're seeing it thus far. There's going to be some bumps on the road. They're not going to go, I think, like their 72 colleagues unbeaten throughout the season, and we'll need to see how they respond to adversity. But certainly in the comebacks that they have shown thus far, that's the sort of kind of clutch performances that you want to see in the fourth quarter. And I have been, he's lived up to the billing. He kind of exploded really onto the scene last year, started doing the kind of press conferences and really going in front of the camera, and people were talking about him in relation to that. And there was a lot of excitement when he moved across about what it might mean. And through the first 3 weeks, but we're only 17% of the way through the season, but through the first 3 weeks, very, very impressive.
On the Monday Night Football review podcast last week, Brian, I was saying to Mark that if the Bills got past week 6, they'd go unbeaten. And I really, really believe that. And it's ironic that they then lost their last game. Have you anything to add before we move on to the Jags game?
No, it's funny you should say that, Michael, because I did listen to 2 podcasts last week, and they had that conversation. That was one of the key conversations on the show, and it was would they go unbeaten? And the 2 games in which people felt they would be in danger of losing would be actually this weekend, having to play the Ravens, is it? Yeah, they play the Ravens this weekend, and then they have to play Kansas City again. And they always play the Chiefs close. Those games can go either way. So they were the 2 games that were earmarked as potential losses, and yeah, the Dolphins have beaten them. I'm not surprised. I did pick the Bills, but I was surprised at the start of the season when we did our preview show. I picked Daniel McDonough to be the coach of the year, and I felt that the Bills would win the division, but the Dolphins would run them close. I still stand by that. I still think the Bills in the end, like Colum is right, the Bills will refocus and re-energize and come again. But the Dolphins are definitely going in the right direction. And the irony of people suggesting games where they will lose when the reality is they've already been beaten, and that conversation goes away very quickly.
Well, the Bills have got beaten. The Dolphins are the only remaining team in the AFC at 3-0. Let's see what happens. Let's bookmark this conversation and come back to it maybe the week after Crimbo. Right, Jaguars Chargers. The Jacksonville Jaguars went into LA and put a marker down on a Chargers team that didn't show up, Colin. The thing about it is it goes into the whole discussion around Justin Herbert and his injury. It was a game time decision. How much of an impact did Justin Herbert have, do you think, in making that decision on saying I'm going to play? They should have just sat him for a week. What is the benefit in bringing him on? But in terms of the West yesterday, Chargers lost, Raiders lost, Chiefs lost, Broncos just about won. So, it would have made more sense for them to sit him. But the fact of the matter is, he had nearly 300 yards passing with 1 pass touchdown, even when he's injured. And he had, I think it was 2 plays that just looked unbelievable, where he got the ball far down the field. That being said, he shouldn't have played at all, and Staley, I think, needs to be asked why he was playing. But also, there's correct me if I'm wrong, there is an injury situation as well this evening, which is going to be a massive blow for them, because I've picked him to win the whole bloody thing, and now it could be an issue for them.
Well, I think Brian has plenty of thoughts on Staley, so I might leave that to him. And I want to give some focus to the Jags because I think they deserve it. The Jags were the highest scoring team of the weekend thus far, highest scoring team on Sunday. The Jags ended an 18-game road losing streak. Doug Peterson joins Urban Meyer as the 5th most winningest coach in Jags history, which is quite something after just a couple of games. But Trevor Lawrence looked fantastic yesterday, and they work with the receivers, the O-line, everything came together for them yesterday. Multiple touchdown passes. That's the first time he's had back-to-back multiple touchdown games in his young career to date. And he's only thrown 1 interception. And so we're seeing that kind of growth and development. And a lot of that is him, and a lot of that is the protection that he's getting. And I suppose the fact that his receivers and others are getting open, and he's getting the ball out quick. He's only been hit 3 times in the past 2 weeks. That's hit. That's not sacks. He hasn't been sacked in the past 2 games. And I think the other thing for me that stood out about the Jags was Robinson. This is a guy who, had an Achilles injury 9 months ago and looked absolutely sensational, has looked absolutely sensational in every game thus far. So we talked about how the moving on from Urban Meyer would give this team a lift, but getting in a competent coach and the players that they have, you'd have to be very, very impressed with what Doug has done with Jacksonville, and it will be really, really interesting to see what Trevor Lawrence might be capable of as we go through the rest of the season.
And I think Brian, like he said it there himself, the fact that Travis Etienne wasn't even the leading rusher yesterday speaks volumes. The situation that they find themselves in the division, I think there's terminal problems with the offensive line in Indianapolis, and I feel like the Titans are going to be up and down. The Jaguars have a huge chance here, haven't they?
Yeah, there's been a few people watching a few shows this evening. They're all now changing their tune and saying the Jags are clear favourites to win the division. I think we need to pump the brakes just yet. It's a great start to the season. They really should be 3-0. Like, upon reflection of what we've seen from Washington over the past 2 weeks, yesterday was a debacle, and then last week's performance against the Lions for large parts. I mean, the Jags let that one slip in week 1. They should really be 3-0. But even watching the game, and you see on the sideline and Doug Peterson out on the sideline, he's talking to players, talking to Lawrence. It's very evident that they've got a coach that knows exactly what he's doing, and the players understand exactly what's expected of them. What impressed me most, actually, in terms of the offense, was the variety of players who were getting the ball. It wasn't just all led towards Cork because he was the big signing, or Robinson. You touched on Etienne, he got the ball as well. And the touchdown scores in terms of receptions, Zay Jones, Marvin Jones, Christian Cork all got a touchdown, and then obviously Robinson goes off the big run for the touchdown. And Evan Ingram, who I know a lot from my time as a Giants fan, was getting more involved yesterday. He seems to be quite confident. He had a touchdown that was touch and go with it could have went his way and it didn't. It was reversed, but they're all getting in on the action. It's a significant win. Just on the Chargers, like, I understand why they played him. I get why they played him. I know, like, people would look at that game yesterday and say people would have felt they probably could have won the game with Chase Daniels. I wouldn't have agreed with that, but there would have been that suggestion because people still have this feeling that the Jags aren't ready to really compete against the bigger teams, and like a lot of people feel that this Chargers team are ready to go make a push for the Super Bowl. So I can understand why he wouldn't have played him, but I always felt he would play him. What annoyed me more was when the game was out of sight at 31-10, he was still in the game, and when it went 38-10, they still had him in the game. At that stage he should be recognising the fact that the guy's playing with severe injury in terms of his ribs, cartilage, and take him out of the game and try to get him ready for this Texans game next week, which right now might look like they go on the road and might look like a banker win. But in fairness to the Texans, they've played tough in all games so far. So you really, and I believe it's their first home game. It's their second home game of the season, but they'll still be well up for it. It's a strange one, because what to do next week if he's still carrying that injury? Do they go again and give him another shot? At some stage, he's going to get severely injured and he'll be out for the long term, and that's not going to help the team.
Yeah, and I know it's sort of funny to sit here now and in spite and say it, but if Steely had a DeLorean and he would have seen that 2 other teams in his division lost yesterday, Herbert wouldn't even have suited up yesterday. I mean, I think that's the situation. I couldn't believe he was playing, and I thought the fact that it was kept off, and you could see in the first quarter it was so static that there was times where it worked, there was times where it wasn't, and he just wasn't up to his 100%. For 3.5 quarters in Kansas City, the Chargers were excellent. It shows you how much they need Justin Herbert. And Rashawn Slater now being out is a massive, massive loss for them. And I feel like it's going to be a massive, massive, massive uphill battle. But that being said, if you told me how the AFC West was going now, I would have laughed at you. So who knows what's going to happen in this division going forward. And I guess it's anyone's guess, but I have no doubts or concerns about Justin Herbert. I'm concerned as to who let him play, who thought it was a good idea, and who actually thought, well, let's give him the rein of the land here. He's your prized asset. If he goes down for the season, you're screwed, and you've only got another 2-year window before you have to pay him. So I just don't get it. It's a weird move. It reminds me, it's a bit like Peter Canavan insisting on playing in 2005 when he was injured. Yeah, that's different, but it just doesn't make any sense. Why would you? For the sake of an 18-week regular season, 17 games, take the loss, take the hit, run the ball. It's so silly, sir, honestly.
Well, they've no run game. That's very clearly. I think Mark called it out on Friday even on the show that this run game hasn't materialised. Eckler hasn't shown anything just yet in terms of what we saw last year. And it was the added pressure for the offensive line yesterday. So they're so used to Herbert being so flexible and getting outside the pocket. But yesterday he really couldn't do that to the extent of what we've seen recently. He got out of it, but it wasn't, we saw him at times, clearly showing in his expressions that he was clearly injured and struggling. So the additional pressure that went on the offensive line, I don't think it's related to how Rashawn Slater got injured. But it is a knock-on effect for all the players when they know the quarterback is not right, he's not fit, and he really shouldn't be out there. And they're trying to protect the guy. Just brings more strain, and that Jags defense knew it as well. They were going out of their way the first quarter. I mean, I think they sacked him 2 or 3 times just alone in the fourth quarter.
Indeed. Let's wrap up that podcast segment here now, and obviously we'll talk more about that during the week, both on social media. There'll be a review podcast on Tuesday for the Monday Night Football. I can't remember what day it is, folks. My God, let's just leave that segment there. The Colts against the Chiefs. I am not giving Brian the satisfaction for picking the Colts because he picked the Washington football team, or whatever they're called this week, to beat the Eagles. So while I will say well done, Jesus Christ, man. We'll talk about that towards the end of the show. Anywho, Colum, where do we start here? Rivalry aside, in terms of just pure neutrality, just not the day that the Chiefs wanted. They couldn't really get anything going on offense, and they couldn't get the ball down the field in certain situations. Mahomes, what was it, 17 points? I haven't got it on screen here right now, but they really miss Harrison Butker. The Colts defense came to play, but the thing that is letting that Colts team down massively, and fair play to the Colts for getting the win, it's the Frank Reich offense with that offensive line. That offensive line is shocking. How long has Matt Ryan got before it just destroys him and destroys his time? And he's got about 3 weeks, because it's a matter of time until he goes down. I was stunned that they found a way to win that game because of that offensive line. There was a bit more of a push from Ryan, and you could see it in that last play. Was it 76 yards where the guy Woods had a touchdown? But the reality is, on the basis of the 4 quarters, they should have lost that game by 10, 20, 25 points, and they didn't because the Chiefs couldn't finish the dinner, and it's a really, really poor result for them.
Yeah, and I will put my hands up. This is probably the most surprising result of the entire weekend for me. I talked about it on the preview show, the way in which Patrick Mahomes has played against Gus Bradley's defense in the past, the way in which Patrick Mahomes has played in domes in the past. It was all set up. I doubted Frank Reich, I doubted Gus Bradley, and they proved me wrong. This is, I suppose, it shows that, if things start to go wrong, this league, it's built around parity. We've talked about this time and time again, and Stephen Holder was talking today about the fact that it's parity on steroids this year. We've had 47 games thus far in the league to date. 18 of those, so nearly 40% of games have been decided by a field goal or less. Right, that is insanity when you consider it. So that is the type of fine margins, and that's where people need to think about that. I suppose a lot of these games are almost coin flip games, and for the Chiefs, the muff punt, Sky Moore has had a nightmare start to his Chiefs career to date. He's not getting targeted, and then when he comes on in special teams, firstly he muffs it, then the other one he kind of jumps out of the way, and Kelsey came out and apologized afterwards. Yeah, the Harrison Butker issue, there Mahomes arguing with Bieniemy. We saw Shady talking about that today. So yeah, certainly a day to forget for the Chiefs. They need to go away and regroup. But kudos to the Colts in terms of sticking in there. Matt Ryan had talked about how he went around to the team and kind of tried to give them a pep talk this week, and they hung tough. And especially Michael, when that O-line at times, it looked like they had 5 turnstiles out there, because he was just there and they were coming at him from all angles. But he hung tough, and despite giving the ball away early on, they come back to get the win.
Brian, it seems like if that game was an Arrowhead, it would have been, or whatever it's called now, is it Giha? It would have been 70-10. Genuinely, I feel like it was just the defense, the home crowd factor, Jim Irsay screaming, as Colin mentioned there, the propaganda from NFL accounts at 3 o'clock our time with Matt Ryan pumping him up, and just a weird game. And Sky Moore, let's just say if he was playing for Man United and he was a 19-year-old and Sir Alex Ferguson was managing, he may not see the field again. The thing that was like, and Colin mentioned it there as well, the Bieniemy situation was strange. The way that he looked at Mahomes and the way Mahomes went back to him as well, it was, I'm not saying ding 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 situation, but I'm very much looking forward to the next difficult game that the Chiefs have to see if we can hopefully get round to.
Well, that's difficult games going to come very quickly. Sunday Night Football against the Bucks. What a game to get yourself back on track.
Wow, I mean, defense, but like,
we're 2 years removed.
I mean, as long as they can score more than 12 points on Sunday night, they'll be grand. Yeah, I mean, are we really?
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah.
I mean, Jesus.
I don't take any glory in picking the Colts in this game because they didn't do, with the exception of the last drive, they didn't do anything in this game to deserve to win. I did feel that defense. I thought the intensity of the hits yesterday across the league was kind of notched up a bit. You can see that these teams were coming to play. It's like, we really got to get our act together. This was one of the teams in which I said desperate teams get desperate wins, and this is what it was. It was a desperate win. Like, they gave 14 points away on turnovers by Matt Ryan. In fairness to Matt Ryan, he even tried to break out of the pocket, to run. The poor man can't run anymore. Unfortunately, he got caught from behind and he fumbled, and they took 14 points. But it was a game of missed opportunities for the Chiefs. I mean, Kelsey, I don't know how he didn't catch a second touchdown. The sun got in his eyes for one of them. There was another at the other side of the end zone which he dropped. There was the one which looked like he may have gone in for a touchdown that wasn't really challenged or reviewed. Just everything that could go wrong offensively yesterday did go wrong, and then obviously they're settling for field goals, and then they're missing field goals because they don't have their proper kicker in. And it was a strange one. They just didn't seem to. They never looked comfortable throughout the course of the game. And like any game in the NFL, you leave a team hanging around, and then fairness to Matt Ryan, he has the experience. He has done it before. 76 yards of 16 plays to win the game. Bearing in mind, one of them was a late hit as well, so they got a nice complimentary 15 yards from it, which certainly helped to put them in with an opportunity to win the game. As for the argument at halftime, I probably sound like I'm always talking about siding with Mahomes, but I really am on this one because they had 16 seconds. They've got one timeout, and they're at the 47-yard line, and they essentially need. Okay, the kicker is not having the best of days, but essentially they need probably about 15, 16 yards to get into field goal range. He's arguably one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and your coordinator. And this is what I struggle because everybody says Andy Reid is the one that calls all the plays, but yet the offensive coordinator and the quarterback are the ones having the argument on the sideline. Why does he allow the clock to? I think the quote was, "We're fine here." Well, in the end, they lost by 3 points, and that three points or an opportunity to kick a field goal there was significant. So I do agree with Mahomes. I think they should have been a bit more aggressive. Because the way the Colts were playing that stage, they had a chance to put the game away.
Okay, let's jump from the Chiefs to. Okay, let's talk about the Broncos game. I thought I seen something else. Do we want to talk about this game? I mean, this game was absolute shite. I'll say it. I mean, we're allowed to say this word in Ireland in case anyone, because there's a whole thing here. You can't say the word shite. It was absolute dog shite, Colum, and. I know a man, and I'll not name his name on here, but I know a man that's 60 odd years of age, I think, and he went over to that game. Had never been to Denver before, a big Broncos fan, and that was the game he went to. And I feel for you, mate. Jimmy Garoppolo. Oof. And the thing is, it was that bad that I actually forgot that Colin was watching it. I should have texted him at the same time. I literally forgot. So there's a public apology. Really poor game. Very, very poor in the offense from the Broncos. And they lead. They're joint lead in the AFC West. 43 points scored in 3 games. But for the 49ers, the game was there for them on multiple occasions, and they didn't take a column. Jimmy Garoppolo literally gave us a safety away. Just, I feel like you'll watch the game in 20 years and it'll go down as one of the worst games ever. It was that poor, and there's been some very, very poor games in the first few weeks. And the late window yesterday wasn't great. That wasn't great last night. Jesus only knows what tonight's going to be like. What was your thoughts on that game?
If Trey Lance had the performance that Jimmy G put in last night, there are a couple of people on this show who would have crucified him. This is why the 49ers wanted to move on for Jimmy G. When he's under pressure, when he's under duress, he's a nightmare. The safety was actually the best thing he did because it actually got him out of an awful pick six that he threw, which also led inadvertently to the Trent Williams injury. So that was just a nightmare play all around, which will obviously get replayed for forever. To be, convert 1 of 10 on third downs, and Jimmy was 3 of 7 for 18 yards total on third down. You got to throw beyond the sticks, Jimmy. Kyle might need to get somebody to run up and down the sideline screaming that at Jimmy to help for the rest of the season. Look, Michael, it was awful. Like in terms of our offense, and there were a whole host of penalties, and the Broncos win it by virtue of the fact that their defense came up better, and a lot of that was down to Patrick Surtain and Randy Gregory. But some stats just to highlight, because fortunately a lot of people will have been asleep. But the Broncos are the only NFL team in the last 30 years to win a game despite having at least 8 more 3-and-outs than their opponents. So the Broncos had 9 3-and-outs, which is quite something. First time since 2016 that a team wins while punting 10 plus times in a game. The last team to do that in 2016, the Broncos, when they beat the Jags. So time truly is a full circle, and here we are all over again. The only thing as a Broncos fan that I can really take for it, the defense was very good, and Russell Wilson managed to get it done when it mattered. But my goodness, there is an awful lot to be concerned about still.
Brian, Russell Wilson said that it was a great game immediately after on NBC.
The adrenaline must have been still pumping, Michael, because I don't think anybody else was watching the game.
Yeah, like Jerry Jeudy's nowhere to be seen, but also the Niners. I stand by saying that the Niners have a better chance of winning the Super Bowl this season with Jimmy Garoppolo, quarterback, and Trey Lance in the current situation. But Jesus, they're poor. But then again, Brian, the NFC is complete rubbish in comparison to the AFC, so you never know.
Yeah, I still think they have a fair crack. We can't home in on one game throughout the course of a season to whether a team's going to have a really successful season. The Niners, to me, had this game all night long, and they threw it away. You're talking about all the punts that they had, like both teams obviously couldn't move the ball, but when the majority of the game, the Niners, when they started the ball, in terms of where they were starting the field coverage, was nearly at the 45-50 numerous times. So you're talking about 20 yards, give or take, on a drive to get into field goal range, and they couldn't. And then they leave. Like, it's like anything we spoke about there with the Colts. You leave a team hanging around, no matter how poorly they play, it only takes one drive at the end. And fortunately for the Broncos, they managed to get a drive when it didn't. I'm concerned about Russell Wilson, to be honest, slightly, because I don't know how you feel about this, but he doesn't seem to, for me, have the legs that he had in terms of getting out of the pocket as quickly as he did. Maybe that's because of years of having a struggling offensive line that it's catching up on him. I thought the Broncos' offensive line last night was... I'm undecided. I said to Colum on a text about the game, I said I was undecided whether it was 49ers defense that we all love and know that are so good that they were so strong last night, or just the Broncos' offensive line was so bad, but they just got exploited so many times, and Russell Wilson, I felt, struggled. But look, I picked the Broncos because I felt that they would just about have enough to get over the line in this game, and they did. And I know you talked about the 6-year-old Broncos fan that went over the first time. He's still coming home with a victory, and I'm sure the last 5 minutes will have been made his night in the end. But it was a long night for both sets of supporters to watch that game.
Yeah, and I feel like it would be a disservice to anybody listening to this if we continue to talk about it, to be honest with you. Let's cut that segment off and jump into the next one. The Packers at the Bucs, another classic. Tom Brady scoring his third passing touchdown of the season in week 3, albeit 271 yards, because all he done was throw it to Braith all night. Russell Gage as well, to be fair. Aaron Rodgers finally starting to get Romeo Doubs. I actually had to Google last night at one point to see if Christian Watson was active, Colin, but I mean, this game was forgettable to say the least. I mean, this game should have been in the early window because it was that bad. It was actually shocking. Like, there was a reason why it wasn't in red zone for most of the night, personally.
I feel bad for the early window games because they get an unfair rep a lot of the time. It's just that I think so much gets lost in there. No, this wasn't a particularly good game, especially against two of the stellar QBs of their generations. Different, for different reasons, missing wide receivers. I think both will be there or thereabouts. I think come the end of the season, I think the Packers receivers, you're beginning to see maybe some green shoots of life, and the Bucs should be getting players back. We talked about it on the preview show. Cole, in terms of the Cole Beasley piece, when Godwin is there, maybe he'll be complimentary, but what he brings is so different, and I think they really miss Godwin in the slot because he's so important for what they do. Lenny, they're still struggling. They're feeding him, but like they're really struggling to get it going in the way that their run game has gotten going before. So I imagine both of these teams are going to want to move on from this game. The Bucs obviously to get back on track. Packers will just be pleased to have gotten a win, gotten more reps for their young receivers, and hope that there are better days ahead.
Brian, I texted my CEO this last night, so I'll ask you this. Will Tom Brady make it to Munich?
Absolutely. He may not play very well before he gets there, but he'll be there, and he's probably fortunate that he's going to be playing a team that I said will win 9 games in the Seattle Seahawks. But
oh no.
Are you concerned about his mental state, Michael? Or are you concerned about his physical state?
I don't think that's fair. There was a time in the fourth quarter yesterday when he was sacked, and look, granted, the defenses were great yesterday to watch. And if you like defensive football, some of those games or special teams, you would have loved some of those games. I don't think he's got the love for it anymore, and it's quite clear on press conferences, the way that he looks when he's playing. It's clear this is his last year, and I was joking with a few people on like WhatsApps and stuff, but I don't know. Will Brady make it to Munich? Will Brady take a week off? Do not be surprised. I'm just putting it out. I'm just putting it out there. Do not be surprised if Tom Brady finds a way to have that week off because he's not allowed to go over the pond.
It's all very, very confusing because we spoke about it in our pre-season stuff around the fact that he went off for those 10 days. He then last week it was announced that from now on he would have Wednesdays off, and they put that down to wear and tear in his age. But then last Wednesday he did option. It's optional, so he shows up last Wednesday because he needs to try to get, I suppose, Cole Beasley and others involved in terms of getting ready for the game. And the reality is, without the players, there's too many good players missing in that team, whether Brady's on 100% or not. Like, when you're missing Godwin, Evans, Julio Jones comes in, makes an impact week 1, he's gone again. He's gone back on injury because he's been plagued with injuries even his time in Tennessee last year. The running game is a bit like Lenny Fournette's good, but the support in the background isn't there. I felt that the Pack would win. I know it was a lot closer. It was a lot closer than I expected, to be honest, because the Pack for a long time were comfortable. This game really should have been out of sight. I mean, the first 2 drives by Rodgers, he's 12 for 13. There's 10 plays in the first drive, there's 12 on the second. There's 2 touchdowns, and then if you the next drive, they fumble in the red zone. Aaron Jones fumbles at the 2-yard line, and if that goes in at 21-3, you can forget about it. They came back, and then even the play calling at the end. I mean, they let the play clock drop down on the touchdown, and then they don't learn the lesson on a 2-point play, and they get called for that. They have to go back 5 yards. Things aren't smooth. They're not going right. It's you could say it's a bit of a transition into a new head coach as well, and it'd be interesting to see how they react to the defeat this weekend when they play the Chiefs, because the Chiefs are in the same position, having to rebound off a difficult loss.
some seriously dodgy calls and play calls and timings over the last 3 weeks, and last night was no different at the end of the game. Interesting to watch. What's the next game to look at here, gents? Are we going to talk about the Eagles at some point tonight and the fact that they're the best team in the NFC, or are we going to wait to the end, or what's the plan here? Right, Ravens. Oh, jeez. Right, okay.
You can do the Eagles now, Michael, if you want.
I'm joking. Can I just say, for the Pats fans listening to this, and let's just call it out. There's been reviews. Thankfully, lots of good reviews in this podcast. We were left a review a few weeks ago saying that we were biased against the Patriots. I'm not biased against the Patriots. The Patriots had a dynasty, and their coach is the greatest of all time. But the current situation they find themselves in is not a favourable one in their division. And I want to pick the Patriots for a game. However, I can't remember who they're playing in week 4. Colum, do you know who they're playing offhand in week 4? Anybody know? I think it's somebody difficult. I think it might be the Packers. No, they're not winning this weekend anyway. Anywho, I thought Mac Jones was faking it last night. I know Strictly Come Dancing, or Dancing with the Stars in the South, started on Friday night and Saturday night, and I know Tony Adams was reeling back the years with his dance. Mac Jones jumped to make it look like he was tripped up or tackled on Sunday night, and I genuinely was thinking when he hobbled off that he was taking the piss, and now he isn't, so my thoughts go out to him. I have to be fair to Mac Jones. Mac Jones yesterday had 321 yards on the day. Granted, he didn't pass a touchdown in the game, but he rushed for a touchdown. He done a gritty. I mean, he's making the best of what he can do. I mean, but obviously him and was it Parker, Colum, are looking like Randy Moss and Tom Brady. So I mean, look, the good times are back in New England. They're playing the Packers this Sunday, and Bill Belichick was all smiles in the press conference this week. But let's talk about the team that deserved to be talked about here. Lamar Jackson is on course for beyond an MVP season at this point, Colin. He is unbelievable, and that Ravens team are going to go deep.
Yeah, look, Lamar, he backed himself, and my goodness, is he having a season at the moment. I saw a tweet from Field Yates earlier that had most games in NFL history with 3+ passing touchdowns and 100+ rushing yards. Number 1 is Lamar Jackson with 4. Number 2 is Lamar Jackson over the past 8 days, where he has 2 such games. And then number 3, there were 6 players tied for 1. So it tells you just how good Lamar Jackson is, how well he's playing, and how many zeros he is adding to that contract. He leads the NFL in passer rating, in passing touchdowns, and he also happens to be 3rd in rushing yards. He is a special player, and the Ravens just need to put the complementary pieces around him. Obviously, their tight ends are probably doing more in terms of their wide receivers, but their defense looked, better. I mean, helped out by Mac Jones at times. I don't think Mac Jones is helped out by the wide receivers, and I think that's the biggest issue for me in New England. But this Ravens team, Michael, I would certainly, they'll punch a ticket to the dance, and nobody I think will want to face them. But that's right. That's at week 3. We all know what that injuries can impact. But I mean, for all of us, I think we would love to see what if Lamar can keep going on this trajectory. What does this season look like for him? What will his final stats be? It could be scary good.
Okay.
Sorry,
no, it's fine. I mean, and I don't apologise to me. I apologise to people on the podcast wondering why has nobody been talking for the last 5 minutes.
I'm less speechless by this Ravens performance. No, look,
I thought you were going to say you were less speechless by the Mac Jones gritty and the fact that Mark's not on this broadcast tonight, and that could be the reason why. Because again, I mean, I was hounded for talking in a certain way about Mac Jones in the preseason. Mark went bananas, and it's week 3, and
I feel Patriots fans. Patriots fans for me today will probably feel like this is a game that got away. Like they had plenty. They had 2 opportunities to take the lead late in the game, and he threw interceptions. But I did feel Mac Jones played a really good game yesterday. But statistically, you look at it, he didn't show a touchdown, he showed 3 interceptions. 3 interceptions of all of which were targeted to Devontae Parker. So maybe these cornerbacks have got a handle on that player, because he's not the player he was when he was in Miami at the start of his career. And Page just played them tough. I thought he would, but Lamar is Lamar, and the Ravens pulled away. I would actually be a little bit more cautious around this Ravens defense. I'm not overwhelmed by how well they've played so far. We saw what happened last week in the fourth quarter, and I thought for large parts yesterday they were run ragged by a Patriots offense that by and large is not one of the best in the league. So I think there's tougher days ahead for this Ravens team. And I was actually checking, is it next weekend? It's the Bills and Ravens this weekend.
I mean, what a game, and that's in the early window.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, 6:00. Yeah.
So we'll be watching it in Tottenham for an hour before we kicked out. That's the plan.
Pretty much. Yeah.
And on that, we're in Tottenham on Sunday, 9:30, 9:45. We'll confirm that at some point, but we've got a broadcast on Sunday morning opposite Tottenham Stadium, and please open up the cup and tea and join us. It should be good cracking Sunday morning. I can't wait to wreck London this weekend when there's no trains, no crack, and I can't get a ticket for the Arsenal match. Okay. Colum. Brian was all in the Raiders. It's week 3, they're 0-3. Let's talk about the Raiders. Devontae Adams got paid, but Jesus Christ, he got paid with conditions at the minute. This Raiders team with McDaniels, over/under wins 6. Do you think it's fair at this point?
It's been a nightmare for them. They, given that they are 0-3, the only 0-3 team. And I was looking at Josh DeBow, who's the Raiders beat writer, pointed out that the teams that beat the Raiders are 0-6 in their other games. The Ravens' best season after an 0-3 start was they went 8-8 in 1986. So they're in a real hole at the moment, and nothing seems to just be clicking, right? Darren Waller had an awful drop yesterday. They just cannot get it right. And Ian Rappaport was on Pat McAfee's show earlier on talking about the fact that McDaniels had the meeting with Mark Davis. Was that a 3-hour meeting? And
2 weeks in.
Rappaport said that was standard. No, I don't believe. I think I agree that the seat isn't getting hot, but a 3-hour meeting after a game is not. That's not standard. No way. If that is accurate, that's what I had seen initially. Kudos to the Titans. I thought the Raiders needed this more, and therefore I thought they would get the win. Kudos to Mike Vrabel and the Titans. They responded to a couple of or certainly a poor performance at the week prior. But yeah, this is not a situation the Raiders wanted to find themselves in.
Brian, can the Raiders turn it around? Because any Raiders fan is listening to this and will probably unsubscribe now from this podcast because I've been so down on them. I will say, well, Michael, the Broncos can't play offensive football at the minute. Their defense is getting them to win games. The Chargers are on and off like a switch, and the Chiefs weren't that convincing yesterday. So, they've still got loads of divisional games. There's a lot of time left. Can they turn it around though? Because it seems very. I don't think rusty's the word on the offense, but they do one thing and then they do the other, and it's just not good enough at the minute.
There's no consistency to the play, Michael. The first game against the Chargers in SoFi, they played well in the second half, had an opportunity to drive down and win the game, couldn't do it, didn't do anything for the first half. Last week they played very well in the first half, only scored 3 points in the second half. Yesterday they were down 24-10 at half time and essentially didn't show up for the first half, apart from the exception that one drive when Devontae Adams gets a touchdown. And then the second half they come back, late on with it looked like they were going to come back. I mean, they had the opportunity to tie the game at the end with the 2 points, but the big players aren't doing for him. Like Colum's touched on Waller, he had so many drops yesterday, and one in particular in the end zone. Devontae Adams is getting double teamed for large parts of the games. They need to find a way to get that resolved, because the Packers were able to use him to their advantage when he was double teamed last year, And yesterday's star for him was Mac Hollins. He had a 48-yard reception, a 60-yard reception. He scores a touchdown at the end. He was a 4th-round pick by Philly a couple of years ago and discarded. So they're relying on younger players to keep them in games. And Derek Carr, when Carr's good, he's really good, and when he's poor, he's very poor. And yesterday he was struggling, and he was looking for flags off the referees all the time. I do think it's still I know it's 0-3 and it doesn't look good, but I think next weekend essentially is really a make or break game because it's a divisional game. They're at home to the Broncos. Raiders fans will argue that the Broncos right now can't move the ball. Does that mean that they can withstand the Broncos offense and allow them to potentially put points up on the Broncos defense and win the game? It'll probably end up being a close game, and the division is up and down at the moment. Well, I can't see a blowout. I couldn't see a blowout for either team, Michael.
Oh no, I know. I just, we know what your pick's going to be, and it's Monday. I'm joking.
I don't believe so. Michael, I picked the Broncos last night. Remember?
I didn't. So I mean, I'm taking the piss.
I was the only one that picked the Broncos. In fact,
let's talk about the Eagles. We haven't really had a chance to talk about the Eagles properly because they were on Monday Night Football last week, and we haven't, as a group, sans Mark, talked about this properly. Colum, I have to give it to you, mate. Whenever you picked the Eagles to go to the Super Bowl in your picks, I thought, go on, I've had a really, really rough week. I'll take what this lad's smoking. Give me double whatever he's took, please. You're bang on. There's no team in the NFC as it stands 3 weeks in that are anywhere near them, and we need to talk about the Rams at some point here because there are issues with the Rams, in my opinion, in terms of the defense, in terms of the relationship between McVay and that defense, and also the way that they let the Cardinals stay in the game last night was really unacceptable. But going back to the Eagles, the standout team in that conference by a country mile. Jalen Hurts' column is unbelievable. I genuinely cannot believe how good they've been for 3 weeks. Seriously.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. There's a long way to go, but given the schedule and given what I really liked what they have done, and we have seen Hurts take steps over the past couple of years. Okay, he went from 52% completion in year one to 61% to nearly 68% so far this season, and he's throwing over the middle. Right, that was the biggest knock on him coming into this year. They got AJ Brown, and in fairness to Hurts, he seems to have taken a step. There's a long way to go. But when you have AJ Brown and Smith, and your tight end can do some sort of Jedi moves to make defenders miss, and you have the O-line that they do. It makes an enormous difference. And this was an absolute beatdown on the Commanders. So the Washington's possessions yesterday were punt, fumble, punt, stopped on fourth down, touchdown with less than 2 minutes left.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, doesn't it? It's that's like the Broncos past five years. It was a nightmare for Carson Wentz. Howie has done a good job. The Eagles need to just continue to do this. They're not going to go unbeaten throughout the season. We have to see how they respond to adversity as well. But they have done, you can only beat the teams that are in front of you. I think it will be a really interesting matchup between them and the Jags next week. And we will really see their O-line tested in that game, because I think the Jags D-line has done really well, and they give you all sorts of problems in terms of what they can do. So that should be a really fascinating battle next weekend. One that I think had, people looked at the schedule prior to the beginning of the season and looked at week 4, people would have gone, nah, there's nothing to watch there. Well, all of a sudden, it's an interesting game.
Brian, I know, like me, you've nothing else to be at with your day, and you've nothing to be at. So like me, you've Googled the schedule for the Eagles. It's hard to see them not winning a lot of games, man. And it's actually annoying to hear some of these matchups on this show tonight for week 4, because it seems like in transit we're going to miss a lot of these matchups on Sunday. Like that should be a great game, but the Eagles look unbelievable.
Yeah, they're playing very well offensively. I was very disappointed with Washington, having seen all these games throughout the years, NFC East games that are usually nip and tuck to the very end, which is what I expected didn't materialise, and starting to quickly realise that this Washington team aren't a very good side this year, which was quite surprising because I thought Coach Rivera would at least have them very competitive. Devontae Smith yesterday for me was a standout player because AJ Brown has been getting so much of the focus since the trade, and the attention he's got week 1, week 2. He showed up yesterday and caught some beautiful balls, and the touchdown was fantastic. This weekend will be interesting. It's not so much about the game for me; it's about Doug Peterson as well, going back to his old stomping ground, having won the Super Bowl for the Eagles, and how his time ended there to be fired within 3 years of winning the Super Bowl. It doesn't really happen very often, so he'll have an axe to grind, I imagine. And this Colum's alluded to the fact that this game at the start of the season looks like a win-win, but as the season goes on, like every season, games become much more difficult. But the Eagles will certainly fancy their chances, and I wouldn't put them as favourites for the NFC just yet, but I think there is other teams that on their day can match them and beat them. But they're a team that's learning, and the head coach is young and he's learning, so it'll be interesting when they come up against stronger teams throughout the course of the season.
Can we agree one thing with Philly's connections to Ireland, lads? If Philly win the Super Bowl, we're all heading to Philly. Is that the plan? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. The lads go to Philly.
I think I'll be sick that day.
We are at all 32 broadcast teams, not counties.
Now, if a result goes a certain way tonight, there will be 2 teams within the division unbeaten. Let's not forget that. There's 3 teams left in the NFL unbeaten, Michael.
I know, but like if you take all 32 teams and look at the offense of all 32 teams, like, geez, like the Eagles.
I've always been a defensive type of guy. I get my kicks from watching good defense.
All right, well, look, I don't know, like we have to look at it in a way where it's, objective in terms of no team. So I don't know. I really have, as a fan of the game, they've been very enjoyable to watch, and there's been some clangers of games so far in a negative way this year. And that game, even against Minnesota last week when it was a bit of a blowout, to be honest with you, their offense is very enjoyable to watch. So let's see what happens. Let's jump into a quick fire round. Colum, how the hell are the Bears 2-1? Please tell me, because I just don't get it anymore personally. And Davis Mills, it's alright.
They're the trash team, Colin. Remember?
They are trash. They are. Like, how the hell did Davis Mills not win that game yesterday? Like, that is.
They blew it. Sorry, Colin.
They blew it.
They did. Well, Davis Mills blew it because he showed that he did not see Roquan Smith. I don't know how you miss a player of the size of Roquan Smith, but he did. And look, you would have to say kudos to the Bears, because they have got the 2 wins. Now they're playing football, they have the wins, but this is football from a different era. They sit 8th, right, on the fewest completions through the first 3 games, right? The 2022 Bears have 23 completions through the first 3 weeks. The next team in terms of what, you have to go back to 1982. The Patriots in 1982 had 16 completions through the first 3 games, when you consider that. And every other team, right, the other 6 on the list, are all from the 70s. So, and the vast majority of them are from 71, 72, and 73.
It's a pity how we haven't got Mark on tonight, because he could talk about those teams and those players.
regale us with his memories of those teams.
And Brian as well, to be fair. I haven't forgotten about that as well.
So I don't know how it's going to play out for the rest of the season, and whether they're ever going to allow Justin Fields, to actually throw the ball, or what their plan is. Obviously, next week they're going up against Brian's Giants, so that will be an interesting one. But
I can't believe the bins are being collected on Friday, Colin. Or I can't believe the bins are being collected on the Sunday. Sorry, I had the best joke ever and I couldn't even get it right. Sorry, go on ahead.
No, look, they have found a way, and given the situation that they found themselves in, and that their former GM and their former head coach left them in, they've won 2 more games than I expected.
Brian, I had a sheet which said what you're going to talk about the Bengals against the Jets. Can I just say I really enjoyed watching Sauce Gardner yesterday, and leave it at that.
The Jets fans are very disgruntled today, Michael. I picked them. There's a lot of expectation coming off that great win last weekend. People felt they would really challenge this Bengals team that have been struggling offensively, but some of the defensive plays by the Jets yesterday was left a lot to be desired in terms of the hitting and missed tackles. That touchdown before halftime to me signified the game. They were missing tackles throughout the course of the game. Chase was taking these 2 or 3 yard catches and turning them into 15, 20 yards, and it was quite an easy game in the end for the Bengals. I felt it'd be tougher. I thought the Jets would find a way to win, but the Jets are such an up and down team at the moment. I mean, they struggled in week 1. They find that miraculous comeback last week to go out yesterday with great expectations. Flacco has been given the benefit of the doubt that he can play at a level that's competent as a quarterback, and yesterday again he just shows that really he's not fit for purpose. It's all about Zach Wilson this week for the Jets. Steelers away. They imagine he's going to be ready. For the Bengals, they needed to get off the slide. It's a big win, and more so even by the fact now that they have the Dolphins on Thursday, so that makes for a really great game. But there wasn't a lot. Like, Bengals fans today would be delighted that they got off with a win, and there wasn't a lot to really be concerned about. You knew by halftime this game was over.
Mark's not here, so we're not going to talk about the Lions and Vikings game because the Vikings are coming to London this week. They're actually not coming to London until Friday, which seems to be the case with a lot of teams this year. Scoop of the week there. The Saints are already in London, or they're on the way to London now. I think they got here this morning. They've trained already. I'll, please God, be at one of the training sessions on Friday. Should I go to the Saints or Vikings? What do you reckon? I mean,
Vikings.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't want to go to the Saints because I'm
Justin
going
Jefferson.
to hand it off to Taysom Hill.
Gordon's Kirk Cousins. He's a sound guy. He's the kind of guy.
He's a nice guy. I'm hoping it's a good game on Sunday, and we'll talk about it then. Lions bricked the bed. That's all I'm going to say. And fair play, Vikings got a win. So, and I picked the Vikings on this. I wasn't on the broadcast, but I still picked the Vikings. So, big up to O'Connell and the Vikings. In terms of the Seahawks and the Falcons, the Seahawks Super Bowl was week 1. I was watching a bit of the game yesterday, and I tried to compare the crowd noise week 1 to the crowd noise yesterday, and then obviously the whole drone thing happened. They're not great. And the thing that I was impressed with was the offense from the Falcons. Kyle Pitts still waiting to get a touchdown, but Cordell Patterson with 140 rush yards on the day just really says it all. An enjoyable day. Does anybody want to talk about the Rams Cardinals very quickly? Because I feel like we're leaving that out, and I think I don't think all is well in LA at the minute. I mean, I'm sure it'll be fine in a few weeks, but it's a bit stop, start, and there was a few great plays to Cooper Kupp yesterday, but I mean, will Cliff Kingsbury lads be in a job come Halloween?
I think they'll keep him purely on the basis that they gave him the new deal, but whether he's in situ at the end of the season or not remains to be seen. I've seen Cardinals fans talk today about the fact that you look around the league and see what the Eagles have done in terms of building around their young QB on that rookie contract, and that's where you want to be, and that is not at all where the Cardinals are. We talked about it on the last week's review. We talked about it on the preview. The Cards are completely reliant on moments of magic from Kyler Murray. There doesn't seem to be any other strategy other than that. And if that doesn't happen, or if teams can prevent Murray from making that happen, then there's nothing else there for the Cards.
We just jumped to the game, Brian. Yeah, that was a good choice. We've done this for just nearly 2 years. I've never been so undecided about a game. Like, I made this pick on Wednesday last week, and I genuinely cannot think properly about this game. Now, I have messed up the graphics here, so I can't change it until both of you lads give your picks. Colum, do you want to go first?
I agree in terms of it's a really difficult matchup to pick because I think, they talked about the Giants, and the Giants are a work in progress, right? And they've obviously had a great start. I think they've probably surprised themselves a little bit with the start they've had, and they're probably ahead of schedule on where they thought they might be. The Cowboys they have some great pieces. Especially on defense, and they have some pieces on offense, and obviously they can go out and get wins. But to me, when I look at it, the Micah Parsons has been struggling with illness, from what I believe, and I think if he was fully fit, I probably would lean towards Cowboys, because I think he is such a difference maker. But he's not. And Thibodeau is coming in, and I think that the Giants still have that feel-good factor around them. And I think that given Dak isn't there, and I think having had more on tape for Cooper Rush and more time to prepare, I'm going to say that the Giants edge it. But I think America is in for another primetime game where neither team scores over 20 points.
There's so many positive reasons as to why I should be picking the Giants. Colum's alluded to Kayvon Thibodeau is making his first start. There's a lot of pressure on him. There's a lot of expectation, but Ujulari's coming back as well, so both of them are back. Lennon Williams is out. First game he's ever missed in his career from college to the pros. He's a huge loss, because when he's there, essentially most of the time they can shut down the run. Zeke Elliott's inconsistent. Pollard is the player. I think he's a great player. The Cowboys need to feed him more, whether it's with receptions or in the backfield. And then the two games in which the Giants have won, I feel that it's masked again an average offense to date this season. They didn't show up in the first half against the Titans, played well towards the back end of the third fourth. Last week, similar scenario, took 6 points off. Good field goal range, good field position, because they got 2 fumbles off the Panthers, and then they scored 1 touchdown in the second half. So Tony's out. He's inconsistent. Golladay there's something really wrong there. Golladay only got 2 snaps last week. He's come out this week, and it's caused a little bit of a rumpus by saying he should be playing, and why isn't he playing? And everybody's saying he's doing the right things, but yeah, he's not on the field. Dable's response is, I play the players that I see participating fully in practice. So that's commendable for a new head coach. Everybody's buying into it. But I am going to side with the Cowboys. I think it'll be a tight game. I think Cowboys will find a way just to edge it. I do think that Giants defense will play well, but I just think somehow the Cowboys will find a way to win. And Giants haven't been 3-0 since 2009, 13 years, and I really hope it is to change tonight, but I just have a feeling that the Cowboys will find a way just to eke out a low-scoring game.
Alrighty, Mark Cockerell, Mark C, is going with the Giants. I don't know who Hoagie Bar is going with. If anyone knows, tell me now.
Cowboys.
Brian, you'll know.
Cowboys. I'll pick the Eagles when Hoagie picks the Giants.
Okay. I've been sort of back and forth in this game for the last few days, but I do think if the Cowboys can replicate their performance against the Bengals, albeit a lot of it was towards the end of the game, if they can get 20, 21 points, they'll win this game. I think it's great that the Giants have started off the season very well, and there's a case for them going 4-0 and coming into London 4-0, and that could happen, but I just think the Cowboys will get it done tonight in the run with as you said, Tony Pollard and Zeke as well. But I think it'll be an absolutely crap game, and it's one that I would prefer to be in bed for, personally, and I'm saying that publicly on the internet. So yeah,
I can declare I won't be in bed for it, Michael. I will be 100%.
Yes, and you'll
in.
be live tweeting tonight. So if you are interacting,
I will take up that responsibility tonight.
Hashtag Dal versus NYG.
No problem.
Let's get some comments in here before we go off for the night. Just before we do go off, we're live on Sunday. That was the wrong graphic. We're live on Sunday from Tottenham at 9:30 a.m. Please do join us. Let's see if we got any questions. Big shout out to Fred, Irish Jets fans, Keith, Tony, L. De Bruyne, saying back spasms. Yeah, but Tua, I get that completely. McNutty, how did Tua stay in the pitch? That's a very good question. Trying to find a question we can put up here as well. Thanks so much for your comments, folks.
Just to remind people as well, Michael, that we are live on Wednesday and Thursday this week. So we'll be looking ahead to obviously the Thursday night game and going a little bit earlier on our weekend preview show, given the trip to London, the fact that we will be live on Sunday, we're going to preview that on Thursday. So just to let people know about that. And also, I've just seen it confirmed that Jalen Guyton has torn his ACL. So the Chargers are down one of their main kind of deep threats as well. It couldn't get a whole lot worse for them, I feel.
Big thanks to Asterix for the comment. Don't get to catch many streams live, lads. Just want to say fair play for repping the Irish NFL scene. You used to do a class job. Thanks a million. Right, that's us. Yeah, all good. Yep. We're back on Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday. Until then, enjoy the game. Really, try and enjoy it. Good luck.
Come on, enjoy it.